The night was colder than usual in Vermont. The power flickered, and for a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Until I felt a small hand shaking mine. "Grandma," my grandson whispered, "don't sign anything tomorrow, please." His eyes were wet, his voice trembling, not from fear of the dark, but from something he'd already seen. That was the night I realized. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from lawyers or policemen. It comes from a child who's brave enough to whisper it. When you lose everything, you tell yourself family will feel like safety. That's what I believed when Ethan opened his front door and hugged me that morning. The cold Vermont air followed me in, along with the smell of smoke that still clung to my coat. He said softly, "Mom, you don't have to worry about anything now. Just rest." The house looked like a magazine photo. White walls, warm lights, no dust, no clutter. Melissa appeared behind him, smiling the kind of smile people practice in mirrors. "Come in, Mom," she said. "We've already prepared the guest room. It's the one with the best view." Her voice was smooth, almost too polished. I nodded and stepped inside, careful not to track snow on their perfect floor. For a moment, I thought maybe things would be okay. Maybe losing my home wasn't the end, just a new chapter. Dinner that night felt like an interview. Ethan talked about work. Melissa asked if I needed help contacting my insurance company. Owen, my grandson, just poked his peas, avoiding his mother's eyes. The clinking of forks was the only rhythm in the room. At one point, Melissa reached for her glass of wine and said, "You're lucky, Mom. Not everyone gets to move in with family at your age." Lucky. That word stayed with me. Later, she slid a folder across the table, her nails clicking against the paper. "Just some insurance forms," she said sweetly. "It's all routine. Once you sign, we can help manage things more efficiently." I looked at Ethan. He smiled the same way he did when he was 12 and caught lying, gentle, guilty, and small. "Sure," I said quietly. "Tomorrow." When I went upstairs, I could hear their voices through the vent, Melissa speaking quickly, Ethan answering in short, tired tones. And beneath that, the whisper of snow brushing against the window. I didn't sleep. I kept seeing my old house in flames, the photo albums curling into black petals. I remembered the sound of the fire truck, the officer saying, "You're lucky to be alive." And now, Melissa said it too. Lucky. Around midnight, the hallway light flickered. I thought I imagined the shadow at my door until I saw Owen standing there, barefoot, his face pale in the dim light. He didn't come in, just whispered, "Grandma, don't sign anything tomorrow." I sat up. "Why?" But he shook his head, eyes wide, and slipped away before I could ask again. The next morning, Melissa had already printed another set of papers. "Here we go," she chirped. "We just need your signature on the claim release and the new policy transfer." Ethan and I talked. "We'll handle the funds. Make sure you're comfortable." I tried to read the fine print, but she leaned closer, her perfume heavy. "It's boring stuff, Mom. You trust us, don't you?" That word again. Trust. Ethan stood behind her, silent, hands in his pockets. I looked at him for help. He looked away. "I'll sign after lunch," I said, setting the pen down. "I'd like to read it properly." Her smile tightened. "Of course," she said, though I could tell she didn't like that answer. At lunch, she talked about her mother. She's at Green Valley now. It's wonderful. The nurses are saints. Honestly, I don't know why we waited so long. She took a sip of wine and added, "Sometimes it's just better when professionals handle things." Ethan gave a small laugh, but he didn't meet my eyes. Owen stared at his plate again. I smiled politely, pretending my heart wasn't twisting. The sound of the silverware was deafening. After the meal, I went for a walk. The cold bit through my gloves, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house. I stopped by the frozen pond behind their yard, the same pond Ethan used to skate on when he was 10. Back then, he'd wave at me from the ice, shouting, "Watch me, Mom." He always wanted to be seen. Now, he wouldn't even look at me. When I came back, Melissa was on the phone. I heard her say, "Yes, we'll need the signature today. No, she won't be a problem." She noticed me and quickly smiled, lowering her voice. I went straight to my room. Owen was sitting on the floor, playing with his Legos. He looked up at me and whispered, "Grandma, Mom said the papers make it easier for you. But why does she need your name on everything?" I knelt beside him. "What do you think, sweetheart?" He shrugged. "I think she's scared of you." "Scared?" I smiled sadly. "Why would she be scared of me?" "Because you see things," he said simply. That night, I found the folder again. The top page was an authorization for property claim consolidation. My name printed neatly. My signature already there. My breath caught. The loops of the G and T looked perfect. Too perfect. But I hadn't signed it. I checked the date. It was dated 3 days before the fire. Downstairs, Melissa was humming softly while washing dishes. Ethan was saying something about letting go of the past. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at that paper. My hands were shaking, but not from age, from anger. In the mirror, I didn't see a week-old woman. I saw the accountant who balanced $1 million ledger to the cent. The mother who paid off a mortgage in half the time. The woman who once taught her son to tell the truth, even when it hurt. If this was the story they were writing for me, the helpless widow who signs and fades away, I was going to rewrite it. I folded the papers neatly and hid them inside the lining of my suitcase. When I turned off the light, I could hear them laughing softly downstairs. Their laughter didn't sound cruel, just certain, like they already owned the ending, but they didn't. I whispered into the dark, more to myself than anyone else. "You can't steal what I'm still holding." Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing everything in white. Clean, quiet, almost forgiving. But not yet. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. The truth doesn't stay buried forever. It waits, and sometimes it whispers through the smallest voice in the house. A 12-year-old boy with trembling hands and a heart too honest to lie. Stay with me. The truth is only beginning to breathe. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories about family, trust, and the courage to see what others ignore, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep this light alive. The next morning, the house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you listen harder. Ethan had gone to work, Melissa was out running errands, and Owen sat at the kitchen counter, pretending to read. He kept glancing toward the hallway like he was waiting for someone to show up. When I poured my coffee, he spoke without looking up. "Grandma," he said softly, "Mom keeps a folder in the study with your name on it." I froze, the cup halfway to my lips. "What kind of folder?" He shrugged, eyes still on his book. "It's blue. She said it's for insurance, but I think you should see it." Something inside me tightened. I'd spent 40 years balancing ledgers, tracking details no one else noticed. And I could feel it now, that faint tremor in the air when numbers don't add up. That afternoon, while Melissa was out, I slipped into the study. The room smelled like furniture polish and lemon. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk. Too neatly. There it was, a blue folder with a white label, written in her perfect handwriting. Authorization. I opened it slowly. The first page stopped my heart. My name printed in bold letters. My signature right beneath it. Except, it wasn't mine. Every curve of the letters was perfect, like someone had studied my writing for years. But the M was too smooth, too careful. My real hand shakes just slightly at the end. This one didn't. I sat down hard in the chair. The date on the document was 3 days before the fire. For a long time, I couldn't move. The only sound was the ticking clock. Then I whispered, "They forged it." Saying it out loud made it real. Owen's footsteps startled me. He stood by the door, eyes wide. "I didn't want you to get in trouble," he said quickly. "Mom said it's just insurance stuff, but she had you sign things before, right?" I shook my head. "Not like this." He walked closer, hesitated, then whispered, "Grandma, was the fire your fault?" The question hit like a slap. "No, sweetheart, it wasn't." He looked relieved but also scared. "Mom said sometimes accidents happen for a reason." That night, I couldn't eat. I watched Melissa serve dinner, smiling like she always did, calm, composed, polite. She poured wine for Ethan and said, "Everything's moving along with the claim. We'll finally have closure." Closure. That's what you say when something's over. But my story wasn't over. I tried to meet Ethan's eyes, but he kept looking down at his plate. When I finally spoke, just to ask about the claim, Melissa's fork froze midair. "You don't need to worry, Mom," she said sweetly. "It's all handled. The insurance company already sent the payment notice. You signed the release, remember?" My heart pounded. "I signed what?" She blinked, tilting her head. "Oh, you must have forgotten. It's fine. I have the paperwork." Forgotten. The word lingered like poison. She wanted me to question myself. After dinner, Ethan followed me to the hallway. "Mom," he said quietly, "Melissa's just trying to help. You've been through a lot. Don't make this harder." I wanted to scream, to shake him, but all I said was, "Do you think I'd forget signing something that gives away everything I own?" He sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "It's just insurance, Mom. Trust her. Trust her." That night, I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked tired, but not broken. "Maybe I'm losing my mind," I whispered. But, deep down, I knew. My mind was sharper than ever. I took out a pen and wrote my name on a blank sheet, then another, then another. I compared them under the lamp. The loops, the slant, the pressure, all different from the one on that forged page. My handwriting told the truth, even when no one else did. I hid the blue folder under my mattress. Tomorrow, I'd find a way to copy it, maybe even show it to the police. But part of me hesitated. What if they believed her instead? She had everything: money, connections, charm. I had age and a reputation for forgetting things. That's when I realized the cruelest trick of all. When people want to silence you, they don't take your voice. They just convince everyone else that it doesn't matter. Owen knocked softly. "Can I sleep in here tonight?" "Of course," I said, moving over. He curled up beside me, small and warm. Before he fell asleep, he mumbled. "I heard Mom talking to someone on the phone. She said, 'Once this is done, she'll be taken care of.'" "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. At dawn, I woke up to the faint smell of smoke. Phantom smoke, from a fire, long gone. My hands clenched around the blanket. Something about that fire had always bothered me. The way it spread too fast, the way the investigators never found the cause. I'd been so ready to believe it was an accident, because the alternative was too heavy to carry. But now, holding that fake signature in my hands, I saw everything differently. If they could fake my name, they could fake a tragedy too. I stood up quietly, brushed Owen's hair back, and whispered to myself, if they think I'm too old to notice, they're wrong. Downstairs, Melissa was already awake, humming to herself while packing lunches. The morning light made her look almost angelic. She turned when she saw me. "Morning, Mom," she said, smiling. "Did you sleep okay?" I smiled back, calm as stone. "Yes," I said, "better than I have in weeks," because for the first time, I had proof and a plan. Sometimes justice doesn't start with a courtroom or a confession. Sometimes it starts with a single sheet of paper. And the woman they underestimated signing her name one last time. For herself. After that night, something inside me shifted. I stopped waiting for kindness to reveal the truth. Instead, I decided to watch. Really watch. So I started playing a different game. I pretended to be exactly what they wanted me to be. Old, tired, confused. I let my hands tremble when I picked up a spoon. I asked the same question twice, smiled when Melissa corrected me. She seemed almost relieved, as if my weakness made her stronger. Every morning, she'd bring me coffee and say, "You slept well, I hope? You need rest at your age." Her words were wrapped in sugar, but her eyes measured me, like she was checking the expiration date on a carton of milk. I smiled back, all gentle and harmless. "You're such a good girl, Melissa," I said once. She froze for half a second, just long enough for me to see the truth flicker in her face. I began keeping a small recorder in my cardigan pocket. The first time I used it, I felt ridiculous, like some spy from a cheap movie. But the next day, when I played it back, I caught her voice, calm, careful, saying, "Once we get the transfer completed, things will finally be ours. Ours." I replayed that word again and again until it sounded like a confession. Ethan was harder. My son wasn't cruel, just blind. He was caught between the woman he married and the mother he owed. Every time I tried to talk to him, he'd rub his temples and sigh. "Mom, please, you're overthinking. Melissa handles all this better than I do." He said it like an apology, but it hurt more than any insult. At dinner, she'd touch his arm when I spoke, a tiny gesture, almost invisible. But it silenced him. I started noticing all the little things she controlled. When we ate, what I wore, how Owen spoke at the table. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was her stage. But she underestimated one thing. People my age have patience. I could wait. Owen was the only one who still looked at me like I mattered. He'd leave small clues, a key tucked under my teacup, a folded receipt slid into my book. Once, he handed me a flash drive, whispering, "Don't open it now." His hands were shaking. That night, when everyone slept, I plugged it into my old laptop. Inside were recordings, audio files from the home security system. Melissa's voice again, sharper this time. "He'll sign. If not, I'll make sure she's declared incompetent." I stopped breathing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I played the clip again, and again. In the next room, I heard Ethan's faint snore. My son, my only son. How could he not hear the poison beside him? The next morning, I poured coffee for both of them. My hands steady, my voice calm. I had the strangest dream, I said, smiling. In it, you two were discussing selling my property. Melissa laughed lightly. Oh, Margaret, you and your dreams. Ethan looked up, startled. We'd never. I know, I interrupted, still smiling. Just funny how real it felt. Her hand tightened around the mug. She smiled back, but her eyes went dark. We were playing the same game now, one where every smile was a weapon. Later, I recorded a message on my phone just in case. If anything happens to me, look for the folder labeled June Fire. You'll find the truth there. Then I saved a copy of everything on a cloud drive Owen helped me set up. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded, like he understood what silence costs. A few days later, Melissa suggested I see a doctor. You've been forgetful, Mom. Maybe it's stress. I'm fine, I said. But she pressed on, soft and insistent. It's normal, you know. Memory loss, confusion, it happens. We should get documentation early, just in case. The way she said documentation sent a chill down my spine. That night, I found a note slipped under my door. Just one line, written in a child's hand. Don't let her take you to the doctor. The next morning, I pretended to forget my appointment. She smiled too wide when she called the clinic to reschedule. I realized then that she wasn't just after money. She wanted ownership of the story, the house, the narrative of who I was. She wanted to turn me into paperwork. I decided to beat her at her own game. Over the next week, I played the perfect part, misplacing things, repeating stories, nodding when she talked about helping me manage my assets. But while she watched, I watched harder. Every call she made, every letter she hid, every sigh Ethan gave when he thought no one was listening. The day came when I saw it all clearly. I walked into the kitchen and found Melissa whispering on the phone. Once the transfer clears, she won't even remember what she signed. She turned when she saw me. Morning, Mom, she said, voice bright. I smiled. Morning. I was just thinking how nice it is that you handle everything for me. You must trust me a lot. Her expression flickered. Of course, Mom. Why wouldn't I? Because, I said softly, trust is expensive. For a split second, she froze. Then she laughed. Too loud, too long. You're funny, Margaret. I laughed too. It was the first honest sound between us in weeks. From that day, the tension in the house became electric. Ethan started avoiding both of us. Owen stayed close to me whenever he could. And I, the quiet old woman everyone thought was losing her mind, had become the most dangerous person in the room. Because I had proof. Sometimes, justice doesn't start with shouting or fighting. It starts with pretending not to notice. Until you have everything you need. And when that day comes, when the mask finally cracks, no smile can save the liar behind it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and rain. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, pretending not to shake. Across the room, Melissa looked perfect. Hair smooth, posture elegant, a pearl necklace resting against her collarbone. To anyone else, she looked like a devoted daughter-in-law trying to do the right thing. But I knew better. The clerk called my name. Case 4217. Petition for guardianship. My stomach tightened. That's what it was called on paper. Guardianship. But really, it meant to take her voice, take her rights, make her disappear legally. Ethan sat between us, eyes fixed on the floor. He hadn't looked at me once. When the judge entered, Melissa rose first, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. Your Honor, she began, this isn't about punishment. It's about safety. My mother-in-law's memory has been slipping. We're simply trying to protect her, she said. Protect, like it was mercy. The judge nodded. Mrs. Hale, do you have representation? I stood up, slowly. Yes, I said, and turned. A young woman in a navy suit stepped forward, barely 30, holding a folder like a weapon she knew how to use. Her name was Anna Reyes. I didn't know her yesterday, but apparently Owen did. He had found her email online, sent her everything, the fake signature, the recordings, the USB. He'd written, "Please help my grandma. She's not crazy." Anna smiled at me before facing the bench. Your Honor, my client isn't losing her memory. She's losing her home. The judge's brow lifted. Explain. Anna handed over a small drive. Security footage from Lakeview Bank, dated 2 weeks before the house fire. You'll see the defendant's signature appear on a property transfer form, except Mrs. Hale wasn't present that day. Melissa shifted in her seat. That's impossible. Anna cut her off. It's time-stamped, and the handwriting expert confirmed it's a forgery. The judge leaned forward. You're alleging fraud. I'm presenting evidence, Anna replied. And there's more. Audio recordings, phone transcripts, bank correspondence, all pointing to intentional misrepresentation. My heart pounded as the clerk played the audio. Melissa's voice filled the room. Once the transfer clears, she'll be too confused to contest it. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Ethan's head shot up. Melissa, what? She grabbed his arm. That's taken out of context. Anna's tone stayed calm. Then perhaps she can explain why she also called a neurologist to prepare documentation for early cognitive decline. Mrs. Hale never saw that doctor. The silence was heavier than thunder. I looked at Ethan. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Melissa's face stayed frozen, a statue of innocence cracking at the corners. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Hale, would you like to speak? For a moment, I couldn't. My throat burned. Then I stood. I spent my life working with numbers, I said softly. Numbers don't lie, but people do. My signature is supposed to mean something. It represents my name, my work, my memory. When someone steals that, they're not just stealing property. They're erasing a person. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. I'm not senile. I'm not lost. I just stopped being heard. Until now. The judge watched me, expression unreadable. Do you have anything else to add? I took a deep breath. Yes, my grandson. He's 12. He saw what the adults wouldn't. He told me not to sign when everyone else said I should. Maybe the world thinks children don't understand truth, but sometimes there are the only ones who still do. Anna rested her hand gently on my shoulder. Your Honor, we ask that the petition for guardianship be dismissed and that a fraud investigation be opened. Melissa's mask finally slipped. You don't understand, she said, voice cracking. I was just trying to protect yourself, Ethan whispered. She turned to him, eyes wide. You believe her over me? He didn't answer. He just stared, as if seeing her for the first time. The judge cleared his throat. The evidence is compelling. Until further review, all transfers of Mrs. Hale's property and accounts are hereby frozen. Petition denied. The gavel came down. One sound, sharp, final, like the closing of a long, dark chapter. Melissa sat perfectly still, blinking fast. Ethan rubbed his face, whispering something I couldn't hear. When it was over, people started leaving. I stayed in my seat for a while, letting the weight of it sink in. Anna smiled faintly. You did well, she said. I shook my head. He did, I whispered, glancing toward the hallway where Owen waited, clutching his backpack. As we walked out, the winter light spilled through the glass doors, bright, almost blinding. Owen ran to me, his voice small. Did we win? I knelt down to his level. We didn't win, I said softly. We were heard. That's better. He smiled. Dad looked scared. Sometimes, I said, truth scares people before it saves them. Outside, I felt the cold air on my face, but it didn't bite anymore. It felt clean. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just one quiet voice that refuses to fade. If you've ever had to fight to be believed, even by your own family, you'll understand what that gavel meant to me. The snow had already started falling when Melissa disappeared. It was late afternoon, the kind of gray light that makes everything look faded, like an old photograph. Ethan came running into the living room, his voice shaking. She's gone, he said. She took the car, and Owen's with her. For a second, I couldn't move. The sound of those words sank into me like ice water. Then, without a word, I grabbed my coat. Ethan followed, fumbling for his keys, panic twisting his face. She just needs time, he muttered, trying to convince himself. She's scared, that's all. But I'd seen fear before. This wasn't fear. It was desperation. The kind that drives people to destroy whatever's left before it can fall apart on its own. As we sped down the road, snow began to blur the windshield. The tires hissed on slush. The world outside turned white and shapeless. Trees, houses, fences, all swallowed by the storm. My heart pounded harder with every mile. Ethan gripped the wheel. You think she'd hurt him? I stared ahead. No, I said quietly. But sometimes people don't mean to hurt others. They just can't stand being seen for who they really are. He didn't answer. The silence filled the car, heavy, suffocating. Then my phone buzzed. One new message. From Owen. I'm fine. She's scared. That was all it said. 2 short sentences that broke me open. I showed Ethan, his breath caught. Where is he? I zoomed in on the message. There was a location pin, the woods near the old family cabin, the one we hadn't used in years. Ethan cursed under his breath and pressed harder on the gas. The car jolted as the wheels hit patches of ice. For a second, we slid sideways before he regained control. Slow down, I said. He shook his head. I can't. The road twisted uphill, the snow coming down harder now. Every curve felt like a test. One wrong move and we'd vanish into the white. When we finally saw the turnoff, the headlights caught the faint outline of Melissa's SUV, half buried in snow. The driver's door was open, no one inside. Ethan stopped the car and jumped out before it even fully halted. Owen! He shouted into the wind. His voice was swallowed by the storm. I followed him, clutching my coat tight. The cold bit into my face, each breath a knife. The cabin wasn't far. I could just make out its shadow between the trees. One dim light flickered through the window. We trudged forward, our boots sinking deep. The closer we got, the more my chest burned. My son's voice echoed faintly. Melissa, please just talk to me. Then, a sound, a door slamming. Ethan ran ahead. I tried to keep up but slipped on the ice, catching myself against a tree. The bark was rough, grounding me for a moment in the chaos. By the time I reached the porch, he was banging on the cabin door. Melissa, open it! From inside came a muffled sob, then a voice, broken and shaking. Leave us alone! I pressed my hand to the wood. Melissa, I said softly, I'm not here to fight. Let me in, please. There was silence, then a click, the sound of a lock turning. When the door opened, the warmth hit me first, the smell of smoke and wet clothes. Melissa stood there, her face pale, mascara streaked. Owen was beside her, eyes red but calm. "Mom," Ethan said carefully, "we just want to make sure everyone's safe." She looked at him, then at me. Her voice cracked. "Safe? You think any of this is safe now? You ruined everything." I took a slow step forward. "Melissa, no one ruined anything. It's just the truth coming out." Her jaw tightened. "You think truth fixes things?" Before I could answer, a gust of wind slammed the door open behind us, scattering papers from the table. Among them, I saw a burned photo. The house before the fire. I picked it up. The edges were blackened, but the face is still clear. We looked happy. "I didn't mean for any of this," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but meaning doesn't erase doing." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Owen stepped forward, small but steady. "Mom," he said quietly, "you can stop now." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand." "Yes, I do," he said. "You're scared, but Grandma's not the enemy." The storm howled outside, shaking the windows. Ethan stood frozen, torn between us. The son, the husband, the bridge that was finally breaking under too much weight. I looked at Melissa, really looked at her, and saw what I hadn't before. Not just cruelty, but exhaustion. A woman cornered by her own lies, afraid of the moment when silence stops working. "Melissa," I said gently, "this doesn't have to end badly. You can still tell the truth." She turned away, covering her face. "It's too late." Owen reached for her hand. "It's not." Outside, the snow started to ease, and for the first time, I could see the faint outline of dawn behind the trees. Soft, fragile, like the start of something that might still be saved. In that fragile quiet, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Owen's number. But this one was the old one he'd sent before we arrived. I'd read it again without meaning to. "I'm fine. She's scared." He'd been right. She wasn't evil, just scared. And fear, when it grows too long in the dark, can burn down anything, even love. If you've ever chased someone through a storm, not to punish them, but to bring them home, you'll know this moment. Sometimes justice isn't about fighting. It's about not giving up when everyone else already has. Inside that cabin, the storm outside went silent. You could still hear it in the distance, the wind pushing against the windows, the snow crackling on the roof. But in that small wooden room, everything froze. It was the kind of silence that doesn't wait to be broken. It demands it. Melissa sat by the table, her hands clutching a mug she wasn't drinking from. The firelight made her face look older, the kind of tired that comes from fighting the truth too long. Owen sat near the door, his knees pulled to his chest, watching her, but saying nothing. Ethan stood beside me, breathing hard, trying to understand how his whole world had just fallen apart in a week. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded strange to my own ears, soft, almost calm. "Melissa, why did you bring him here?" She didn't look up, because it's the only place no one would find us. "That's not true," I said gently. "You wanted to be found. Otherwise, you wouldn't have left the light on." Her shoulders shook, but she didn't answer. Ethan took a step forward. "Melissa, please, just tell me what's going on." She turned toward him, eyes swollen. "You wouldn't understand. You've never had to fix something that's already ruined." I felt something break quietly inside me. "Then help us understand," I said. She stared into the fire. It was an accident. The fire. I left the heater on in the living room that night. I saw the smoke too late. I was terrified. I thought if anyone knew it was my fault, everything would fall apart. So I told the insurance it was electrical. I told you both it was fate. Her voice cracked, raw and small. And when no one questioned it, I thought, maybe that meant I was safe. But every lie needs another one to stand on. The house, the papers, the signature. It just kept going. I didn't even realize what I'd become until Owen. She looked at her son until he said he was scared of me. Ethan's jaw clenched. You burned down my mother's house. I know, she whispered. But I didn't mean. He cut her off. You forged her name. You tried to take everything she had. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I know what I did. She slammed the mug onto the table, coffee spilling like blood on the wood. But I couldn't stop. Every day I told myself I'd fix it tomorrow. But tomorrow kept turning into next week, then next month, and then there was no way back. Owen's small voice cut through the air like a bell. You could have just said sorry. That was all it took. The room went still again, and Melissa crumbled. She covered her face, shaking. I didn't know how, she sobbed. I thought saying sorry meant I'd lose everything. I walked closer and knelt beside her. You already lost everything the moment you stopped telling the truth. She lifted her head, eyes red, voice trembling. You must hate me. I shook my head slowly. No, hate's easy. Facing what we've done, that's hard. For a long time, no one spoke. The fire popped, sending a spark into the air. Ethan's breath came heavy beside me. Then he whispered, almost to himself, I should have listened. I should have believed you, Mom. I turned to him. His face, my son's face, was pale, raw, full of guilt. You believed what you were told to believe. I said softly, that's what love does sometimes. It blinds us until the smoke clears. He took a shaky step forward. I thought I was protecting my family. You were, I said. You just didn't see which part of it was burning. And then, for the first time in years, Ethan broke. He dropped to his knees beside me and cried. Not loud, not desperate. Just the quiet kind of crying that sounds like regret. He buried his face in my shoulder and whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. I should have trusted you. I held him, my own tears finally coming. You don't owe me sorry, I said. You just owe yourself the truth. Melissa looked at us, her expression almost childlike, lost, fragile. What happens now? She asked. Now? I took a deep breath. Now, we stop lying. All of us. The snow outside started to slow, flakes drifting like ash against the window. Owen got up and stood beside his parents, his small hands trembling but steady. He looked at me and said softly, Grandma, can we go home now? I nodded. Yes, sweetheart, it's time. Melissa wiped her face, eyes empty but calmer. They'll arrest me. Maybe, I said, but they'll also listen. That's what truth does. It hurts first, then it heals. Ethan helped her to her feet. For the first time, she didn't resist. She just whispered, I never wanted to destroy you. I looked at her, my voice barely above a whisper. The fire didn't destroy me, Melissa. It showed me what still stood after everything burned. Outside, the night was finally giving way to dawn. Light began to creep through the cracks in the boards, pale and forgiving. As we stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, sharp but clean, the kind of air that feels like starting over. Sometimes, truth doesn't save you. It just stops you from falling any further. And sometimes, that's enough. The morning light came slow and pale through the cracks in the cabin walls. Snow still covered the trees outside, but the storm had passed. It was the kind of quiet that only comes after chaos. Too soft to trust, too fragile to last. I sat by the window, watching the first streaks of sunlight melt through the ice on the glass. Behind me, I could hear faint footsteps. Officers talking quietly, their radios crackling. Melissa was sitting near the door, wrapped in a gray blanket. Her hands were cuffed, but her face just looked empty. When the sheriff came to take her, she didn't argue. She just looked up once, at me, then at Ethan, then at Owen, and whispered, "I'm sorry. No tears, no excuses." Just 2 words that carried the weight of everything she'd destroyed. The officers led her outside. For a moment, the snow glowed under the red-blue flashes of the patrol car lights. It almost looked like a painting, peaceful, if you didn't know what it meant. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, his breath clouding in the cold air. Owen clung to his leg, silent. I watched them both, father and son, and realized how alike they looked right then. 2 people standing in the wreckage of something they loved, not knowing what comes next. When the door finally closed, I turned to them. "Go home," I said softly. "Both of you. Warm up. Rest." Ethan's eyes were red. "Mom, I can't just leave you here." I gave a small smile. "You're not leaving me. You're taking your son home. That's what matters now." He hesitated, then nodded. Owen looked up at me, his voice barely a whisper. "Grandma, are you mad at Mom?" I knelt beside him. "No, honey, I'm not mad." He frowned. "But she hurt you." "She hurt herself more," I said. "When you lie long enough, you stop knowing what the truth even feels like. That's the real punishment. Not losing things, but losing yourself." He thought about it for a long time before nodding slowly. Ethan came closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. "How do you do that?" he asked quietly. "Do what?" "Forgive her." I looked outside, where the snow was catching fire in the morning light. "Because hate keeps you in the same night forever," I said, "and I've had enough of nights." We didn't say anything else for a while. The sound of the wind was softer now, almost kind. When the tow truck arrived, I watched as they lifted Melissa's car from the ditch. One of the officers handed me her wedding ring. She'd taken it off before they drove away. I held it in my palm for a long moment, the metal cold against my skin. Ethan noticed. "You're keeping it?" I shook my head. "No. I'll return it when she's ready to wear it for the right reasons." He looked down, ashamed. "I should have seen it, Mom. I should have stopped her before it got this far." I turned to him. "You can't stop someone who's hiding from themselves. All you can do is be there when they're ready to come out." Owen tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, can we go now?" Ethan nodded, wiping his eyes. "Yeah, buddy, we can." Before they left, I pulled Owen into a hug. "You were brave," I whispered. "You did what most adults wouldn't." He smiled, small but sure. "I just told the truth, and that," I said, "makes all the difference." They walked toward the car, leaving a trail of footprints that would soon be covered by new snow. I stayed at the cabin a moment longer, watching the horizon turn gold. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like something was closing in. The world was still heavy, but lighter than before. As I stood there, I thought about Melissa's face when she said sorry, not as a plea, but as surrender. Maybe one day she'd understand what I meant when I told her. Lies don't take everything from others. They take everything from you. The morning air was cold and sharp, but I breathed it in like medicine. When I finally got into Ethan's truck, Owen was already asleep in the back seat, his head resting against the window. Ethan looked at me and said softly, "We'll rebuild, Mom. The house, everything." I nodded, one step at a time. As we drove down the mountain, the snow began to sparkle under the rising sun. Not pure, not perfect, but real. And maybe that was enough. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about setting yourself free from the weight they left behind. If you've ever carried something heavy for too long, maybe this story reminds you the morning always comes. And when it does, you get to choose what kind of person you'll be in its light. A few weeks passed before the letter came. It arrived on a gray morning. No return address, just my name written in careful handwriting I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I didn't open it. I just held it, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Paper doesn't weigh much, but guilt does. When I finally tore the envelope open, the first line stopped me cold. I used to think I'd won every time you stayed silent. Melissa's words were small, almost shaky, but they were hers. Honest, unpolished, stripped of the pride that had poisoned everything between us. She wrote about the nights after her arrest, how the quiet was louder than any cell door closing, how she kept replaying every choice she made, like rewinding a movie she couldn't change. I told myself it was love, she wrote, that I was protecting our family, keeping us from falling apart. But I see it now. I wasn't protecting anything. I was just afraid of being less than perfect. I kept reading, slowly. "You always scared me, Margaret. Not because you were cruel, but because you were kind. You never shouted. You never fought back. And I thought that meant I'd beaten you. But silence isn't weakness, is it? Sometimes silence is just someone waiting for you to tell the truth." My hands shook. I set the paper down, then picked it up again. The words blurred, not because I was crying, but because I wasn't. Ethan found me at the kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of me. "Is it from her?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "She's starting to understand." He hesitated, then sat across from me. "Do you believe her?" I thought about that. The easy answer would have been yes. But the truth, the real one, took longer to say. "I believe she's trying," I said, "and that's more than she's done in a long time." Owen wandered in, clutching a cup of cocoa. He was taller now. It's strange how fast kids grow in the middle of chaos. "Is that from Mom?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you want to hear some of it?" He nodded, so I read the last part aloud. "I used to think truth was punishment. Now I know it's the only thing that lets you start again. Tell Owen I love him. Tell Ethan I'm sorry for teaching him fear instead of faith. And tell you, thank you for not giving up on us, even when we deserved it." The room went quiet again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was the kind of quiet that felt settled. Owen looked at me, his voice soft. "Grandma, does truth fix everything?" I smiled and shook my head. "No, honey, it doesn't fix everything. But it's the only place you can start again." He thought about that for a second, then asked, "Will she come home someday?" "Maybe," I said, "when she's ready to live honestly." He nodded, satisfied, and went to sit by the window, humming to himself. The sunlight caught his hair, turning it gold. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "You're stronger than I'll ever be," he murmured. I laughed softly. "No, I've just had more practice losing things and learning what's worth holding on to." He smiled, the first real one I'd seen in a while. You think she meant what she wrote? Yes, I said. For the first time, I do. Later that afternoon, I walked out to the porch with the letter still in my hand. The snow had melted, leaving patches of earth showing through. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke, the kind of scent that reminds you life goes on, whether you're ready or not. I read the last line again, one more time. I thought silence meant I'd won. Now I see it meant you were still giving me a chance. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket. I didn't need to frame it or keep it somewhere special. The words weren't for display. They were a beginning. Inside, I could hear Ethan and Owen laughing faintly, something about pancakes, about syrup. The sound filled the house like light. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally believed it could be. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive in grand gestures or courtroom victories. Sometimes it comes folded in an envelope, just a few sentences written by a trembling hand saying, "I finally understand." And maybe that's enough. If you've ever been hurt or hurt someone and wondered if it's too late to make things right, it isn't. Truth doesn't erase the past, but it gives you somewhere to begin again. The air smelled like fresh paint and pine. The old house, or what was left of it, had finally stood again. The beams were new, but the memories that clung to them were old, stubborn, and kind. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows, painting gold across the dust that danced in the air. Ethan stood by the ladder, his sleeves rolled up, a streak of white paint on his cheek. Owen laughed from the corner, holding a brush almost too big for his hands. "Dad, Grandma's doing it better than you," he teased. Ethan smiled, pretending to be offended. "Your grandma's had more years to practice perfection." I chuckled softly. "Perfection's overrated," I said, dipping my brush back into the can. "The trick is just not giving up halfway through." The wall we were painting was the same shade it had always been. A pale yellow, warm like sunlight. Ethan picked it because it reminded him of the mornings when his father was still alive. "It feels like home again," he said quietly. I nodded. It does. But not because of the paint. He looked over, confused. Then why? "Because this time," I said, "we built it with honesty." He paused, the brush hanging in midair. For a moment, the sound of the wind through the open window filled the silence. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think forgiveness was weakness, like letting people off too easy." "And now?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Now I think it's the only thing strong enough to hold a family together." Owen piped up from behind the couch, splattering paint in all directions. "And truth, too," Grandma said. "Truth is where you start again." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Looks like someone's been listening." I watched them, father and son, and felt something in my chest finally settle. For so long, I had thought the house was just wood and walls, something I needed to protect. But it wasn't. It was a witness to all our flaws, our silences, our small acts of courage. When Melissa's name came up, Ethan didn't flinch anymore. He simply said, "She's getting better. The counselor says she's learning to take responsibility." I smiled softly. Then maybe we all are. We kept working until the sun began to fade, and the walls gleamed like honey under the last light. Owen turned off the radio and said, "It looks like a brand new house." "No," I said, stepping back to look at it. "It looks like a house that survived." Ethan rested his hand on my shoulder. "You know, Mom, When I think about everything that happened, I don't feel angry anymore. Just grateful. Grateful it didn't end worse. That's what truth does, I said. It burns, but it doesn't destroy. It clears the ground so you can rebuild. He nodded, his voice quiet. I think Dad would have liked this. I smiled, my throat tightening. He would have loved it. Outside, the sky turned a deep amber. The porch light flickered on, glowing soft and steady, the same way it used to before the fire. I looked at it and thought of everything that light had seen. Betrayal, confession, forgiveness, and, finally, peace. We stood there for a moment, side by side, 3 generations, 3 different kinds of strength. Owen leaned against me and said, "Grandma, do you think houses can forgive people?" I laughed softly, maybe not, but they can remind us how to start over. He smiled. Then this house is really good at forgiving. We all laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt easy. When the last brushstroke was done, Ethan handed me the paint can. "You should sign it," he said. I looked at him, puzzled. "Sign it?" "Yeah," he grinned, like artists do. "You built this, Mom. You deserve to put your name on it." So, I did. In the corner of the living room wall, small and simple, MH, 2025. I didn't write it for ownership. I wrote it as proof. That we had come back. That truth still stood, where lies once tried to live. As we packed up the brushes, the house glowed in that soft, forgiving gold. Ethan turned to me. "You ever think about how close we came to losing all this?" "All the time," I said. "But that's what makes it real. You don't value something until you've watched it almost disappear." We stood quietly as the last bit of daylight slipped away. The fireflies began to rise in the yard, tiny sparks against the dark. Owen ran out to chase them, his laughter echoing through the night, the same laughter that used to fill this place before everything fell apart. I leaned against the porch railing and whispered to myself, "Justice doesn't need noise. It just needs courage. The courage to speak the truth, even when everyone else stays silent." For a long time, I watched the house. Solid, steady, golden in the light. Not perfect, not new, but whole. And in that quiet, I finally understood. Some homes burn down to remind us that what truly matters can't be taken, only rebuilt. If you've made it this far in the story, maybe that's what you needed to hear, that it's never too late to rebuild no matter what's been lost. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need a little light tonight. Sometimes that's how healing begins.